So I've been asked one question more than any other question the last few months, and that's simply like, what exactly happened? And I wish I had a simple answer. The truth is, while I remember everything else about that day, I don't actually remember the accident. And there are still parts of that day that remain unknown to me. But after months of recovery, I'm finally ready to just share what I know, what I experienced, and the incredible people that made it possible for me to be here today. For those of you who are new here, hi. My name is Jackie. I am a experienced Utah-based mountain athlete, outdoor educator, and an award-winning and published photographer. 5 months ago, on February 3rd, 2026, I suffered a very life-threatening, severe traumatic brain injury that nearly killed me. If you are local to Utah, you honestly probably heard about it on the news. My lovely sister-in-law was interviewed to tell what she knew about what happened, and as things were progressing in the hospital, Fox 13, KSL, and KUTV covered my story, and I actually got word from friends that it expanded outside of Utah. I have a friend in Idaho who said she saw it on the Idaho news. I have a lot of Colorado friends that said it got passed around a couple different news stations in Colorado, as well as posted in the 14er group. And not just Idaho and Colorado, apparently it went national. It ended up in People magazine somehow, which weirded me out because normally that's when you see celebrity stuff, as well as Outside's Backpacker magazine, and somehow Men's Health. But it also ended up worldwide. A friend of mine told me his parents in the UK saw it on BBC in the UK, and another friend of mine sent me an article that was from Paris, France. Believe me when I say I was shocked and surprised to find out that what happened to me literally became momentarily world famous. I still don't exactly know how I feel about that. The common issue with news stories, especially as they kind of get passed around a wider audience, is they never tell the full story. They're only going off of what little bit of information they have at the time. Like I said, my sister-in-law talked to the local stations with the little bit of information that she had. The local news also talked to the county sheriff and search and rescue to see if they could get a little bit more detail on what had happened. And it was only their experience and their investigative theories based on what they saw on the trail when they found me and what they got from bystander witnesses. So, months of healing and recovery later, here I am to tell you my story, because I think it's important to share what happened to help other people know the risks in the outdoors, but also as a way to help me process through the trauma of it all, because that's all I've been able to do for the last couple months is just try to process what happened. I'm going to start you quite literally at the very beginning, which technically starts the night before. An ice climber friend of mine posted on her Instagram story that she really wanted to climb Bridal Veil Falls in Provo Canyon. This is a very, very popular ice climbing destination here in Utah. I know many people who have climbed it over the years. But when I saw her story in that moment, all I could think was, ice climb on what? We have had such a hot, dry winter that I knew the conditions for that falls probably would not be climbable. Ice climbing requires very cold, consistent temperatures, and we just weren't having that. I couldn't imagine that the falls would have been viable to climb on in that moment. The next day, February 3rd, I spent my morning at my computer here working on some of my training plans for my coaching clients. And then I went to a nearby park to actually film some content for a training tip video that I was gonna post on Instagram, which for obvious reasons didn't get posted. While I was at the park, it was very warm, I was literally in shorts and a tank top, and it was still daylight out. So I decided to drive up Provo Canyon. I parked at the winter parking lot in Trailhead and decided to go check on the conditions for myself and to check on my friend in case she decided to try and go climb. The base of this trail is very much considered like a tourist trail. I know this whole area very, very, very well. I've been up there many, many times in a variety of conditions. That afternoon, I started out at the base, took a couple pictures of the waterfall, and was looking to see if I saw anyone climbing. And what I noticed first was that there was running water coming down that falls. I didn't see her or any other climbers, but I knew that if I went up the trail towards the base of the falls a little bit, I would have better luck in seeing anybody if they were already further up the route, if they had been climbing. The trail takes 2 switchbacks pretty immediately and then goes straight across a few scree fields. I kept my eye out for my friend in the cliffs, and once I got past the 3rd scree field, I decided to turn around. I didn't see her anywhere up there. I didn't see anyone else. And it was starting to get later, and I knew it was time to go back to my car. I made the safe assumption that she probably came, saw that the falls were running water, and decided to opt out. I turned around to head back down the trail towards my car, and I remember taking a couple steps down the hill, and then that's it. Lights out, nothing else. From that point on, anything else that happened is simply news I have received from my husband, from my dad, from Sergeant at the sheriff's station, from search and rescue, and bystander witnesses that I've talked to that were there to help. Also news from trauma doctors and others on my medical team who worked on me for weeks, as well as video from my phone that it happened to record for 1 hour and 40 minutes after I got hurt. What I know based on the massive collection of information as I was trying to fill in my own blanks is that a rock hit me in the back of the head. Search and rescue and witnesses stated that there was a bloody rock on the trail, yet I was found about 16 to 20 feet below the trail in the lower part of the scree field. I had multiple trauma doctors confirm to me that because of the severity of the fractures in the back of my skull, that rock would have needed to come at me at great speed to inflict such a severe blunt force trauma. Search and rescue also had the theory that after I got hit, I tumbled off the trail head over heels due to all my other injuries. What I very much suspect happened is that when the rock hit me, it knocked me off the trail, and that's how I ended up 15, 20 feet below it. Witnesses found both my glasses, my hat, and my phone right off the edge of the trail. I had some closed facial fractures. I suspect those facial injuries from basically a face plant into the rocks before I continued to tumble further. When I got hit, I got knocked out pretty immediately. Listening to the recording on my phone was really hard. I've had to listen to it a couple times actually, and it gets harder every time. I was going in and out of labored breathing and like a crying and whimpering. Search and rescue said when they got to me, I was in and out of consciousness. I unfortunately have zero memory or recollection of any of those subconscious moments while they were all trying to help me. I was left there for over an hour before anyone found me and called 911. When the first people found me, the sergeant wrote on his police report that they happened to find me kind of sitting up, curled in a ball.
And we're going to try to get an ambulance to come over, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my jacket around your head.
When search and rescue got to me, the medics worked on me for about 45 minutes on the trail, and I was bleeding out of my head back here so severely that it had completely drenched my shirt. I was dripping all over my legs and even into my shoes. Search and rescue said while the only bleeding was coming from my head, I was absolutely covered in bruises head to toe from tumbling down. Both of my eyes were completely swollen shut. Life Flight came and was waiting for me, but to get me down from where I was, they needed a helicopter with a winch, and unfortunately Life Flight didn't have that, so they had to call in another helicopter to come get me off the mountain, and then flew me out of the canyon to a parking lot where they switched helicopters, and then Life Flight took me to the hospital. Paramedic continued to work on me in the helicopter until we got to the hospital, and then he helped the trauma doctors in the emergency room. I stopped breathing on my own due to the severity of the brain injury, and I needed to be intubated. My time in the hospital was very long and very intensive. After I was intubated in the ER, the trauma doctor also had to stitch up where the rock hit me back here. He told me it was shaped like a fan, the way everything had cut and split out, so he had to kind of pull my skin back together, and now I have a scar back here. They did CT scans and x-rays to look at the internal brain damage, the fractures, my heart, my lungs, and for any other potential injuries they may have missed due to the amount of bruising everywhere. The most life-threatening concern was the major swelling that was happening in my brain. I was in a coma, and they monitored the swelling for days and tried a series of different medications to try to bring that swelling down. However, my brain was not responding. After the sedatives and paralytics didn't cause a reduce in the swelling like they had hoped, an emergency life-saving procedure became the top priority. My husband had to give them consent to do an emergency craniectomy where they were going to cut out a chunk of my skull to allow my brain to swell properly so that it could reduce on its own. They told my husband it was going to be about a 50-50 shot that I would die if they didn't do the surgery. They did the surgery, told him that it went well, and my brain continued to swell now that it had more space to do so. They monitored that swelling for a few more days before they finally saw signs of reduction and stability, enough that they could finally do an MRI to see what exactly the extent of the damage was. Doctors warned my husband then that there was a possibility that I still might never be able to wake up, or that I might be in a vegetative state. While there was some severe bruising on my brain in the MRI, luckily there was not any catastrophic damage. 3 weeks of very intensive care was spent mostly on a ventilator. After 3 weeks, they took me off that ventilator and performed a tracheotomy in hopes that I'd be able to breathe on my own again. They also inserted a peg tube in my stomach because they weren't sure if I would be able to eat or swallow. After both procedures were complete and the sedation wore off, I opened my eyes for the first time. I couldn't speak because of the trach, but I could obey commands from the nurse, such as, "Can you squeeze my hand? Do you recognize who this is?" And he pointed to my husband, and I nodded yes. I spent nearly 2 months in the hospital in total. About 4 weeks were spent in the ICU. I spent about another 2 weeks in a specialty clinic, and then the rest of my time was on the rehab floor doing lots of physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy to try to get my brain to function again. I was discharged at the end of March, where I got to be home, finally in my own bed and with my husband. I had outpatient therapy appointments pretty much every day for about a month. And then I had a cranioplasty surgery where they put the bone back in my skull that they took out during the emergency surgery. And it is my original bone, not a synthetic. I do have a couple titanium plates that are securing it in place, but they said that the bone will fuse itself back to the rest of my skull, much like when a broken bone heals under normal conditions. After the news came out, I saw a lot of assumptions once I got discharged from the hospital and heard about how much it was covered by the news. Some people assumed I was inexperienced, hiking recklessly, or simply being dumb for going alone. That's one of the reasons I wanted to make this video, since news reports only tell a tiny piece of the story. But rather than focus on the comments, I'd really like to use this experience to talk about something that's very important to me, and that is how risk actually works in the outdoors. After I'd gotten home, I had sent some thank you emails out to the journalists that covered my story. I got a reply from KUTV with interest in getting an update on my healing, and I agreed to it.
A 2 News exclusive tonight. A woman still recovering after a nearly fatal fall at Bridal Falls.
Yeah, Jackie Teachin had been rescued after she fell at the falls on February. She was unconscious for weeks and in the hospital for about 2 months. And she talked to David Ochoa about what happened and her recovery. And David, how did it happen?
Bridal Falls in April is peaceful. But one night in February, it was anything but. That's because Search and Rescue was rescuing Jackie Teachin after she had fallen at the falls.
I honestly don't actually remember the fall.
Teachin was there to watch over her friend who was climbing the falls. She wanted a better view, but didn't get far.
I ended up down here.
She took this picture just minutes before falling.
The rocks beat me up pretty good.
She hit her head, suffered 4 facial fractures, along with plenty of bruises. But the most visible injury 3 months later is what the surgeons did to help her.
They had to remove part of my skull to allow my brain to swell properly and prevent hemorrhage.
What makes this so surprising is that the mountains are in Teachin's blood.
My great-great-grandfather was one of the founders of Rocky Mountain National Park.
She's been hiking for years and has a number of impressive summits and photos under her belt. She says this goes to show that something like this can happen to anyone, no matter their experience.
It can happen anytime to anybody, and it truly was a freak accident situation, and nobody's immune. One of the hardest parts through this experience is that I don't remember the accident. And I may never know what exactly happened. My case is still under investigation with the sheriff's department so that they can try to confirm what happened. But there is a chance I may never get an exact answer. I'm definitely the person that really likes answers, and I like understanding how things happen. So learning to live with this uncertainty has been honestly one of the hardest parts of this entire journey as I've been trying to process it all. After seeing the assumptions that people made, and after realizing I may never know exactly what happened, I kept thinking about the people who did know one thing, and they showed up to help. They knew someone was hurt, and a collection of people with a variety of experience showed up, and that's Search and Rescue. A couple weeks ago, I actually got to meet the Search and Rescue team who worked on my case. It was a much bigger team than I thought it was. I was able to give them all a personal update on how the healing and recovery process was going, and personally thank them for all of their help and for them quite literally saving my life. I will be forever grateful to all of them. I think it's really important to just kind of get that reminder out there to everybody that search and rescue isn't a safety net that exists so that we can make bad decisions. It's a community resource. Those volunteers miss birthdays, they leave work, they leave dinner, they leave their own families, and sometimes they're putting themselves in dangerous terrain because somebody needs help. So we owe it all to them to do everything reasonably within our own control before we step into the backcountry. This doesn't mean never having to ask for help, but it means respecting the resource. Yes, technically there are some rescues that are preventable, but the public usually only gets a fraction of the information when statements go out. They don't know whether somebody needed a true medical emergency, became hypothermic, got trapped by the weather, or they made a small mistake and it happened to snowball. There are kind of two different classifications of outdoor hazards that you should kind of keep in mind when you're out there. Some are things that you absolutely can't avoid, and some are things that you can. So objective hazards, these are things that you can't eliminate. You can only try to reduce your exposure. That would be rock falls, bad weather, falling trees, avalanches, loose terrain, wildlife, or even sometimes other people's poor negligent actions. The avoidable hazards are things that are largely preventable, and this is truly where educating yourself matters. This would be things like ignoring a trail closure or road closure, knowingly going well beyond your ability. No water, no navigation tools, improper footwear, illegal campfires, fireworks, irresponsibly throwing rocks, drinking while operating an ATV or snowmobile, climbing in closed areas, or completely ignoring weather forecasts. This really comes down to respecting the mountains, respect the people who protect them, and frankly, respect the consequences of your decisions. This experience has changed me forever. There are things I may never get back. There are challenges I still face every day as this healing continues, but it also reminds me why I care so deeply for these places in the outdoor community. The mountains have given me so much throughout my life, and I simply just want to use this platform to help other people continue to enjoy them safely, responsibly, and with the respect that they deserve. I may never exactly know what happened that afternoon. There are still questions I can't answer, but I do know what happened afterward. I know that strangers refused to give up on me. I know that search and rescue helped me. I know the flight crew got me off the mountain into the hospital. I know the trauma surgeons and the neurosurgeons fought for my life. And I also know I'm incredibly lucky to still be here and be able to tell my story. Thank you so much for listening and following along. And because this is YouTube, I have to put this in here. Please like and subscribe to follow along as my healing journey continues, and as I continue to share more outdoor education for you all to try to bring my YouTube channel back to life.